I love to sew, specifically garment sewing, and I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that sewing has changed the course of my life. It is something I do for creative fulfillment, and it is also my livelihood. I have a business that revolves around garment sewing. It's just one of those things that hits the perfect creative sweet spot for me. It stimulates my brain in all the right ways. I just really enjoy it. Now, that's not to say that every single person who tries sewing will definitely love it as much as I have, but if you are here right now, then potentially you are thinking about starting to sew your own clothing, and maybe you have a few mental roadblocks that are keeping you from starting. Or maybe you've already started and you have found certain aspects of it to be a little bit frustrating. So I started thinking about this the other day, and I thought, if I was starting today, what would I want myself to know? With all of the knowledge that I have now, if I was coming into this new, what would I tell myself? What advice would I give myself? Now, some of these things are things that I actually already do and kind of started doing from the beginning. And some of these are things that I have learned over the course of the past almost 5 years that I've been sewing my own wardrobe. So the first thing that I would do is I'd pick projects that I'm excited about. And I actually did this early on in my sewing practice because when I was first considering starting to sew clothing, it felt very daunting. I was kind of overwhelmed by the prospect of sewing a garment that actually fit me. And a lot of the beginner-friendly patterns that were on the market just weren't that exciting to me. Now, I sew a lot of beginner-friendly patterns now, but at the time, I wanted something more exciting. I wanted a big win. I don't know. It was just I don't know why I was feeling that way. Finally, I decided to just kind of take a big creative leap and pick something that was a little bit more advanced because it was something that I really wanted in my wardrobe, an anorak jacket. Every time that I would see these styles of jackets in stores, the sleeves were never, ever long enough. And so I was just really frustrated, and I thought, this is the project I'm gonna go for. It was definitely an intermediate or advanced pattern. If it didn't go well, I decided I would just chalk it up to experience, and I decided to go for it. I still wear that jacket to this day. It is a really fantastic pattern by Closet Core Patterns. I'll link it down below. I've talked about it so many times because it was such a huge confidence boost for me. And not long after sewing that jacket, I mean, I'm talking like weeks, after sewing that jacket, I was already starting to sew a pair of jeans for myself. I realized pretty quickly that with a good pattern and the right attitude, I could probably make just about anything I put my mind to. But I don't want to pretend like I don't ever have any sewing fails or that things always go really well. It's not the case. Sometimes I do make mistakes and make things that don't work out, or make things that I don't end up wearing or that don't fit quite right. But I've just continued to pick projects that I find exciting or things that I really want to bring into my wardrobe instead of picking things that are just easy or look easy. And there's no harm in picking something that is a little bit on the easy side if you do feel super intimidated by sewing. But I think you'll get a lot closer to having a sewing win if you pick something that you're actually excited to make and wear. Now, the next thing that I would do is I would focus on building a wardrobe that I love instead of just making things that are trending. When I started sewing my own clothing, I was super active on Instagram, and the community there was just so robust. There was just a lot of activity there, and I loved it. I was consuming patterns constantly. I was making a lot of stuff, and it was great. I actually really enjoyed, searching for inspiration on social media and getting to know some of the other sewists in the sewing communities online. At the same time, I was very heavily influenced by what other people were making and by all of the new pattern releases that were coming out every week. It seemed like almost every day there was a new pattern release. I also made a lot of things that I just wasn't getting a lot of wear out of because they didn't really work with my day-to-day lifestyle, or maybe they were things that were kind of a little bit out of my personal style box. And I think there's a lot of value in stepping outside the box and, trying new things. But I definitely was creating a lot of pieces that just weren't being worn. And it started to feel a little bit wasteful. I also think I didn't really totally know what my personal style was. I mean, I always loved to shop. I always loved to buy clothing at stores before I started sewing my own clothing. And I think that a lot of my personal style back then, it was definitely dictated more by what was available in stores. Over time, I kind of figured out what I really liked, and I became a lot more comfortable in my own personal style and started, being a little bit more mindful about the things that I was bringing into my wardrobe. I wanted to bring in pieces that were not only comfortable to wear day to day, but also, could build on the pieces that I already had, things that could be mixed and matched, because that is something that I value in my wardrobe. And I found myself kind of going for the same types of garments over and over again. So I thought, I'll just kind of focus on these pieces and building off of these pieces that I know I already love. And sometimes those things do happen to be trending items, which is great. But in general, I've just gotten better at picking projects that I know I'm going to wear a lot more, and I'm going to get a lot more use out of those, and projects that are just going to have a longer lifespan in my wardrobe. Now, when I started sewing, I was sewing with all types of fabrics. I mean, I was just like impulse buying fabrics constantly. If there was a sale, I was gonna shop the sale. If I went to Joann and saw anything that even piqued my interest just a little bit, I was gonna buy it. And so I bought a lot of good fabrics, but also a few weird fabrics that just didn't really work as well, or fabrics that weren't very comfortable. So one thing that I would do differently if I was starting now is I would start with natural fibers. That's not to say that you can't ever sew anything that's not a natural fiber, but in general, I have found that the pieces in my wardrobe that are made out of natural fibers like cotton, linen, wool, rayon. Rayon is technically a semi-synthetic fiber, but it is derived from a plant. So I've just found that those fibers are just more comfortable to wear. And especially with cotton and linen, they're really easy to work with, really easy to care for, and are really long lasting and durable fabrics. In my experience, whenever I've sewn anything out of like a polyester material, I just don't end up wearing it because it just feels a little icky against my skin. And I still do sew with fabrics that have a blended fiber content, especially when it comes to sewing activewear and loungewear. You know, having that poly spandex blend in there is actually kind of nice. But for most of my nicer garments, I'm definitely going for natural fibers if I can. The next thing that I would do differently is take the pressure off of myself to sew everything. I have talked about this before, but once I really got into sewing and started sewing a lot, I put this pressure on myself to sew like everything in my wardrobe. I had convinced myself that I need to like make my underwear, I need to make my swimwear, I need to make my activewear, I need to make everything. And I kind of came to realize that I actually don't enjoy sewing every single thing in my wardrobe. I especially don't love sewing activewear, swimwear, or underwear. Those things are not things that are necessarily hard for me to find in a store that fit me really well. And I've also found that the ones that I make for myself in those categories are not as nice as the ones that I can buy. Now I do kind of avoid those categories unless it's something that I just feel really compelled to sew. If it's something that I want to do, I'm gonna do it. But in general, I kind of stick to like nice dresses, tops, pants, and outerwear. I really love sewing outerwear, and I really love sewing jeans because they're big, challenging projects. They have a big payoff at the end, and they're projects that I feel really proud of. So I try to focus my sewing energy on the things that are gonna have the biggest payoff for me personally and are things that I'm gonna enjoy wearing the most. Now this next one is something that I feel like in general I've been pretty good at doing this, but I'd make room for mistakes. Mistakes are going to happen, and you know, part of the reason that it took me a while to get started sewing was not necessarily that I was afraid of making a mistake, but that I would, you know, put a bunch of energy and effort into something that would just not turn out quite like I wanted it to, and I might be disappointed, or I might feel like it was a waste of time. I still make mistakes on a weekly basis. Case in point, I have a project back here that I was originally planning to post this week, and it kind of went off the rails, and I had to do a lot of troubleshooting for it. So I decided to save it for next week, hopefully, fingers crossed. It's really easy to get discouraged when those mistakes pop up, especially if I've been working on something all day and I'm tired and possibly hungry and I probably need to take a break. But one mantra that I have adopted that really helps me power through creative challenges is I am learning and I am getting better at this. Because I never want to say, oh, I'm so bad at this. I can't believe, wow, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I made this mistake. You know, I don't ever talk to myself like that. I try to talk to myself in a way that's encouraging, and maybe that's a little woo-woo and kind of cheesy, but I really do say, you know what? This is a learning opportunity. This is a teachable moment, and you're getting better at this. And the more you practice, the more you do this, the better you're going to get. I know that it's just part of the process, and I embrace those mistakes and use them as learning opportunities. So this next one kind of ties into the last point of, you know, making room for mistakes, but I'd make sure to take my time. Most of the time when I am struggling with my sewing practice, or really anything creative, when I'm struggling or I'm feeling like I'm making a lot of mistakes or I'm getting really frustrated, it's usually because I'm trying to rush the process. And I've just kind of learned over the years that I enjoy it so much more if I let myself slow down and really take my time with each of the details. And it becomes very meditative for me. It becomes very therapeutic for me if I let that happen, if I kind of give myself the time to really enjoy the process. My battery died. Jeez Louise. I'm never gonna get this video filmed today. So before I started sewing my own clothing, I had a different business where I sewed products like little bags and accessories. I was always trying to find ways to sew them faster so that I could produce more in a shorter period of time. And sewing in that way honestly made me hate sewing. I would dread it when I would get large orders. I have to sew all of this stuff and it would just be so overwhelming, and I would just run myself ragged trying to get these products out the door. So when I started sewing my own clothing, I really wanted to do it just for me. Being able to slow down with the process and not have a deadline attached to it, and doing it just for me, I found out that I actually really like sewing for myself. I don't like sewing for other people, and I have zero guilt about that whatsoever. I love sewing for myself, and when people ask me to sew things for them, I say, no, I can teach you how to sew. I have videos and patterns that will show you how to sew, but I sew for myself. I don't sew for other people. There are a few minor exceptions. Sometimes I will like hem pants for people, or I will mend my husband's clothing a little bit. But for the most part, people who know me know that I sew for me. Yeah, no guilt here for spending time or money on myself to do something that I really enjoy. So the last thing that I would do differently is I'd start sooner. I thought about it for years. I thought about sewing my own clothing for years. And there's been other times when I've had, creative ideas or wanting to start something new that I had never done before, and I was hesitant to start. It's so easy to get caught up in the what ifs and the logistics of getting started and, finding a sewing machine and finding the right fabric and all of these things that go into it. And the reality is you have to just pick a project and start. Like, you pick a pattern, it tells you what kind of fabric to use. You go and find that fabric. You may not be able to find it locally. You can probably find it online. I have videos on all this stuff, folks. So I'll put some links down in the description to different tips and advice I have for getting started, but I do think it's important to just take that first step and start. And if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed with all of the logistics of getting started, just, get into this resourceful mindset of figuring it out. You can figure it out. People figure out things every day, all day long. Just try it. Just start. Just try it, okay? I think that is all of the totally unsolicited advice I have for you today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy this video, please be sure to subscribe and hit that little bell icon. That way you'll be notified when I release new videos in the future. I do try to release videos every Friday. Occasionally I take a break, but I talk all about sewing and creativity, and I love posting stuff here for you guys. So anyway, thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. I think that's all I have for you today. I will see you in the next video. Bye.